This structure was home to one of the most important sit-down strikes in Detroit's history, and you've probably never heard of it. Before we dive into that, we need to back up a little for some context. The Mazer family immigrated to the United States from Russia in the late 1870s or early 1880s. The family bounced around, first landing in Pittsburgh. Jacob, one of the children, became infatuated with cycling early in his life and became a leading racer in Pennsylvania. He served in the Spanish-American War and relocated to Detroit afterward. After basketball was invented in 1891, Mazer picked up the sport and averaged over 30 games per year against the best college and club teams in the region, only losing 7 games and winning the state championship in 1918. Decades later, the Detroit Free Press still called him one of the greatest players of all time. Off the hardwood, Mazer and his brother, Henry, got involved in the cigar business. In July 1911, the Mazer Cigar Manufacturing Company plant near the intersection of Willis and St. Antoine, reportedly worth $25,000 at that time, was destroyed by fire, with half of it covered by insurance. After the fire, the Mazer Cigar Manufacturing Company, still led by the Mazer brothers, relocated to the east side into a neighborhood we today call Poletown East. The neighborhood, originally settled by German farmers, had become primarily Polish immigrants, and there were numerous cigar factories nearby. These facilities had been built to employ, as the companies would put it, or exploit, as we now look at it, the first and second generation immigrants. Thanks to this cheap labor, Detroit's cigar manufacturing would grow to become the second largest in the nation behind Tampa, Florida. Polish women became the most common workers in these plants, and they were often paid extraordinarily poorly, faced excruciating working conditions, and were sexually harassed by their male superiors. By 1918, the Mazer Cigar Manufacturing Company was at this intersection, though it was housed in a more primitive 4-story structure. On February 6, 1924, a fire started in the basement of the plant at the corner of Grandy and Theodore. The 5-alarm fire caused the factory floors to cave in, sending firefighters scurrying away from the blaze as timber scattered into the streets below. According to officials, the structure was covered by insurance. In February 1924, it was announced that the Mazer Cigar Manufacturing Company of Detroit would amalgamate with the Allen R. Cressman Sons Company from Philadelphia to create one of the largest cigar companies in the country. In Detroit, a new manufacturing facility would soon rise from the ashes. On Saturday, October 12, 1924, 1,500 employees of the newly formed Mazer-Cressman Cigar Company congregated to celebrate the formal opening of the plant at 5031 Grandy Street. The structure, designed by famed architect Albert Kahn, towered over the neighborhood, mainly consisting of frame houses built in the late 1890s and early 1900s. By the early 1930s, Jacob Mazer had moved on from the company. He stayed in Detroit for the rest of his life and died on July 26, 1958. Shortly after his exit from the company that built this structure, things took a turn for the worse. Unlike the sparsely populated neighborhood that exists here today, there were few vacant lots here in the 1930s. A half-dozen Polish Roman Catholic churches were within walking distance, and there were multiple schools and parks in the area. Despite existing in America, this neighborhood was built on Polish heritage. On February 18, 1937, a sit-down strike was orchestrated at the Mazer-Cressman Cigar Company plant on Grandy Street. Multiple plants nearby planned strikes that same week, and all the plants in the area would soon be idled. What made this strike unique was that no union was responsible for the actions of the workers. This group of primarily Polish women started the protest by rallying together through neighborhood, heritage, and religious groups. By Sunday, February 21st, the CIO, or Congress of Industrial Organizations, backed and represented the strikers. With no agreement in place with management, the vice president of the Mazer-Cressman Cigar Company told the city of Detroit that they would sue the city for any damage to property or injury to persons which might result from the sit-down strike at the company's factory at 5031 Grandy Ave. A tentative agreement was reached with management in early March, though workers continued striking the Monday after because they felt their superiors had refused to honor the terms of that agreement. The following week, a circuit court judge ordered the removal of the strikers occupying the building, despite coming to an agreement with management that they said hadn't been honored. Work resumed at the plant on Friday, April 16th, but strikes were still ongoing in the neighborhood, so then Governor Frank Murphy intervened. He invited the cigar companies, labor unions, and workers to Lansing to negotiate, which was effective, and the plants in Poletown were reopened. On May 22, 1937, the United Automobile Worker newspaper printed an article that stated that there is only one company which is operating under an agreement with the United Cigar Workers of America Union. This is Mazer-Cressman Cigar Manufacturing Company, which manufactures Umo, Dime, Manuel, and Counselor cigars. Despite the hard-earned victory for Detroit's Polish immigrants, the jobs wouldn't last long. By the summer of 1937, the E. Rosenwald and Bros. Company of New York owned the plant. It closed the entire facility because of, quote, exorbitant union wage demands and chaotic labor conditions. Many of Detroit's cigar manufacturers couldn't remain profitable if they didn't take advantage of their workforce. Additionally, as the 20th century continued, cigars fell out of fashion for everyday use, and cigarettes became popular, causing many of Detroit's former cigar factories to be converted to other uses or demolished altogether. Today, the Union history of this structure is mostly forgotten, and these buildings are remembered for government cheese. We've got a few decades to get through before we get to that. By April 1938, the city of Detroit occupied at least a portion of the structure as the Works Progress Administration, or WPA Survey Headquarters, a Great Depression government program. By 1943, a portion of the structure was in use by Print & Co., Inc. as a printing plant for mail advertising. The company was constantly hiring and would be active at the plant for at least 9 years. In October 1952, the Detroit Welfare Department was deciding between purchasing and renovating the structure at a rough cost of $290,000 or building a new structure to put the entire department under one roof for $1 million. The department's workers preferred a new build, but the city didn't choose either option, and nothing changed. By February 1960, the structure was home to Sherman Laboratories, a chemicals company founded in 1907 by Dr. George H. Sherman. His son, Arthur Sherman, planned to take over the business, but got involved in the camper industry after inventing one of the first ever travel trailers in 1929. After World War II, he sold the camper company and returned to the chemicals industry, occupying the former Mazer-Cressman facility for most of the 1960s. By the early 1970s, the structure was home to multiple city-run and sponsored agencies, including the Neighborhood Services Department. Despite being isolated by green landscapes today, this structure is just 1.5 miles from Woodward Avenue and less than a mile from I-75, making it easy for Detroiters to reach. The city likely purchased the structure at this time to house numerous programs under one roof, as was the original plan in 1952. In the early 1980s, the United States government had a problem. They had 560 million pounds of surplus cheese, and the media had a field day. They demanded answers as to why so much surplus cheese was sitting in government storage when food insecurity and rising prices were hitting Americans harder than a stack of bricks, all the while the administration was cutting food stamps. The Ronald Reagan administration's answer was to hand out 30 million pounds of cheese to any state that asked for it, intending it to go to the people who needed it most. You could pick up your government cheese at the former Mazer-Cressman Cigar Company plant and other locations around Detroit, like Focus Hope. Throughout the 1980s, the structure continued to adapt, acting as a home for the City of Detroit's Neighborhood Services Office, Food Depot, Detroit Home Weatherization Program, Child Care Coordinating Council, Head Start Programming Office, and the Emergency Child Care Assistance Fund. By the early 2000s, the structure was home to Detroit's Department of Human Services. In 2011, the department contracted Clark & Associates for $1.2 million exclusively to pay its employees to assist with the city's food and clothing assistance programs, according to the Detroit Free Press. However, the Free Press's investigation showed that the nonprofit spent $210,344 of the contract on furniture at the Human Services Department office at 5031 Grandy, pictured here. This violated a city ordinance that required city council approval for purchases over $25,000. In October 2011, Mayor Dave Bing said that the conditions at the Department of Human Services building at Grandy and Theodore were in dire shape and announced an emergency move from the building to the Herman Kiefer Health Complex near the Lodge in Claremont. Detroit City Council felt this was an attempt to sidestep their approval, and they reconvened and voted against the funds for the move. Despite City Council's vote, Bing continued with the move anyway, stating that the contract they had stopped was for renovations, not moving expenses. To my knowledge, the former Mazer-Cressman Cigar Company plant at 5031 Grandy Street has been vacant and used for storage since the Human Services office moved out in 2011. In the years following the office's closure, the structure has slowly started to decay. Windows have been smashed, pieces of the Albert Kahn-designed facade crumble onto the sidewalk below, and many windows are open. Still, the city employs a security team that visits the structure daily, and the door was recently patched with new wood. Despite its poor condition, the building appears mostly secure and has sturdy bones. There's no question in my mind that this structure should be historically designated. Detroit's most famous architect designed it, and it was the site of one of the most unique sit-down strikes in the Motor City's history. Of the 6 large-scale cigar manufacturing plants in Detroit that are still standing, 4 have received designation from the City of Detroit Historic Designation Advisory Board, which prevents demolition and improper renovations. The 2 that haven't are 2 blocks apart: the Banner Cigar Company at 2941 East Warren and the Mazer-Cressman Cigar Company at 5031 Grandy, pictured here. The other 4 are all in use. The same week that I started making my deep dive video, the City of Detroit listed the former Mazer-Cressman property for sale, and I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't conflicted as a community stakeholder. On one hand, I'd love to see a new owner transform this place into something that bolsters our community and simultaneously turns what most people would call an eyesore into something that pays tribute to the structure's history. On the other hand, it's somewhat unlikely that a new owner would try and get a historical designation for the structure, as it presents more hurdles in an already complicated renovation process. A local designation is the only way to protect at-risk properties, and this building falls into that category. The City of Detroit should have designated this structure locally before trying to sell it, ensuring that a future owner doesn't ruin a historic property that they've invested millions into over the decades. Let's not forget that the City of Detroit has owned this property since before the Historic Designation Advisory Board even existed. Their real estate listing admits its significance, stating that it is one of few factories surviving from the era when Detroit rivaled Tampa as the center of America's cigar industry. Best case scenario, a developer who cares about historic preservation purchases the structure and does right by it, or wants historic tax credits. Worst case scenario, a speculator purchases it and lets it decay, hoping our neighborhood will rebound and make them rich without putting in the work. If money were no issue, what would you do with this structure, and do you think that it deserves a historic designation?
It seems like with every new video I put out, there are more and more of you who are watching but have not yet subscribed, so if this is you, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment down below about what you think the city should do with this building. If you've already subscribed and you want to support the channel, you can look in the description below to buy a t-shirt that I've designed or get a print from my print store. If this particular frame looks familiar to you, this is a pretty legendary skate spot, so maybe that's where you know it from. Until next time, this building matters. Let's see if I can not hurt myself. It's always the goal. Woo! This is Ginger. She lives around here. She's a good girl.